back to another Doctor Who Big Finish video. In today's Doctor Who Big Finish video, I'll be doing my top 10 Big Finish releases for 2019. Now 2019 was a big year for Big Finish. Obviously it was the 20th anniversary of Big Finish having the Doctor Who licence, and that meant a whole plethora of releases, from the massive Legacy of Time, the return of Lucy Miller, we had Chameleon return, the What If Doctor had a 5-year anniversary, and of course we had the conclusion of Ravenous 4. Now that is only scratching the surface of releases Big Finish had in 2019. So the way this video is going to work is I'm going to pick my 10 favourite releases from the 2019 Big Finish catalogue. Now I did recently do my Doctor Who main range overview for 2019. I'll leave a little tab thing there and a link in the description below to that video if you want to check it out. So without further ado, let's begin this top 10. So kicking off this top 10 at 10th place is The Lives of Captain Jack Volume 2. Yeah, what a very odd and strange and fun release this is. Yeah, because this was announced back in May and then it was released in June. So this is quite an exciting one because all three stories have a strong emotional core to them, but there's a lot of fun within the stories themselves. There's great humorous moments, especially Peace of Mind, which I guess is the main talking point for this, because obviously it explains the whole cover of Captain Jack dressed as the Sixth Doctor. As Captain Jack's vortex manipulator is broken and he wants to find the Doctor to get a few answers. But he definitely got a Doctor he wasn't expecting in the form of the Sixth Doctor, but the Sixth Doctor is dying, and we see Jack take the responsibility and the role as the Doctor, which leads to some fabulous moments, and John Barron just being more flamboyant and sort of being more boastful and arrogant and just really taking the mick of the Doctor out of the Doctor, which is great. You know, he keeps talking about sofas and he's trying to solve an alien invasion. And obviously the Sixth Doctor knows that Jack is from his future, so they have quite an interesting relationship, and by the end of it they have quite a good rapport between each character, and it's quite nice to see those two characters get on. And obviously Colin Bates, well, the Sixth Doctor, take the mick out of Captain Jack, since, you know, Jack's been taking the mick out of the Sixth Doctor, so it's a lot of fun, and quite a fun little story that is, and probably the main talking point for this box set. And the second story, What Have I Done, I think is quite an interesting one. I feel like this one could work very well as a stage play, as a stage adaptation, because it's basically two characters, and it almost feels like it could fit the sort of Jodie Whittaker era in sort of the style of the story. But I think that it's quite an interesting character piece between the soldier character and Captain Jack, which is very good. It's a very strong, emotionally charged story, and I think what I enjoyed about this story in particular is that it's exploring a different side of history in terms of the First World War, but it's not the First World War what we expect. It's a very different side to that war. And the third story is Driving Miss Wells, where it's basically Captain Jack being Trinity Wells, the news reporter from the Russell T Davies era, sort of being her driver, and it's all about sort of fake news and sort of coming to terms with alien invasion. You know, is it real? All that kind of thing. And obviously having a strong sort of emotional core with her mother in hospital. So again, it's a really fun release, but does have a strong emotional core storytelling behind it. So this is a very good release. At number 9, we have the end of the Ravenous saga with Ravenous 4. Now this was a pretty good, satisfying ending for the Ravenous series. I'm a big fan of Ravenous. I think that I personally prefer it over Doom Coalition. You know, I feel like Ravenous really gets going in sort of Volume 2. That's when the series really gets started and gets going. You know, Volume 2 really great because it's got a great sort of thematics of horror, and sort of Ravenous 4 is a great way to sort of conclude that series, because it's just how this box set wraps everything up and how it sort of sets the Eighth Doctor in a new direction, how it links to other box sets, so it feels like you have a great, satisfying payoff. You know, the first story, Whisper, is sort of Big Finish trying to do sort of a quiet place sort of vibe to it, which I personally think is the weaker story of the box set, which is not saying anything, because, you know, there are some brilliant stories. Planet of Dust is a real highlight. It's got some great moments, especially involving the Crispy Master. Within that, it's got some quite shocking revelations. Then you have the epic sort of two-parter, Day of the Master. I think part 1 is personally my favourite out of the two, personally. You get some great moments between sort of Missy and Helen seems to have sort of a thing for meeting new series characters. You know, she met Missy, she met the Curator in Stranded, and obviously she met River Song in sort of Doom Coalition as well. So it's great to have the Masters actually interact, because I think, you know, this is a big selling point. You know, Eric Roberts and the Eighth Doctor again, great sort of vibe to it. But I think the problem with Big Finish is that they announce something like, you know, this box set with all the Masters, and then they do it earlier with River Song, so it kind of doesn't have that specialness to it. But obviously the Masters sort of interact within this. It's got some great moments between Liv and the Wallmaster. It's got some great twists and turns, which I'm not going to spoil. It explains sort of the Ravenous origin. But I think what lets this sort of down in a way is that the ending seems a little bit too easy, how they sort of resolve it, and it seems a little bit anticlimactic in a way personally. But other than that, I think that it is a very satisfying end to the Ravenous series. I think another thing what sort of lets this box set down is I feel like what would have made the stakes even higher for this box set is if one of the companions died. You know, there are plenty of opportunities within this box set where you think, oh my god, Helen or Liv are gonna die within this. You know, and obviously you know that they both survive because they're in Stranded. But I feel like what would have made this box set even more of a gut punch and show how deadly the Masters are is if the Doctor lost one of his friends. But other than that, I think that it is a satisfying end to the Ravenous series. At number 8 we have the 10th Doctor Adventures Volume 3. Probably my favourite out of the sort of 3 volumes we've had of the 10th Doctor and over the course of this year. And next year we're going to get a load of 10th Doctor content, which is brilliant because, you know, he was the Doctor of my childhood. So I have a little bit of nostalgia. Well, I say a little bit, quite a bit, because, you know, the 10th Doctor was the face of my childhood, so I do have quite a bit of nostalgia. But these, I really did enjoy. I feel like this is very authentic 10th Doctor style stories. You could easily visualise them being part of Series 4. I think with the other 10th Doctor volumes, there's normally like that one story I'm a little bit iffy on, like Time Reaver or Cold Vengeance, I'm a little bit iffy, whereas these are 3 very solid stories. The No Place is a particular highlight because of good old Bernard Cribbins, Wilf, he's in it, it's amazing. It's very much a comedy, but it's got some great spooky jump scare moments within it, and it's sort of basically Doctor Who does sort of the most haunted sort of home renovation type of thing. Much like a sort of a Doctor Who missing story. I believe there was a missing episode, basically Doctor Who doing Most Haunted in Series 4, and I feel like this is James Goss sort of taking that idea and going, well, I'm going to put my own spin on it. And it is a very good, because obviously it's James Goss, he's very much a comedic writer, and it really plays to the strengths of David Tennant and Catherine Tate, because it's very much a comedy, but it has a great sort of horror moments to it, it has some great little jump scares to it, and is a real highlight of the box set. My one little problem with that story itself is sort of the resolution. It just wraps up in 5 minutes. You're like, okay, that's great. But I really love The No Place. I think that it's a real standout. Then we have 1 Mile Down by Jenny T. Colgan with the Jadoon. Really good world building with sort of city underwater and sort of the Doctor and Donna taking a tour and Donna wearing Crocs. You know, it just feels very 2008, and we've got sort of a baby Jadoon, which is great. It's just a great sort of traditional sort of catastrophe sort of story. You know, it is very such that sort of feel to it, and you can easily visualise it being part of it. And obviously, if you get the limited edition, you get the great sort of costume designed by June Hudson. And I think personally, my favourite of the 3 is The Creeping Death, which it got a vinyl release as well in May by Asda, and I just love it because it's a pseudo-historical, it's grim, it's gritty, you've got some great supporting characters, you know, it's very emotionally charged as well, with especially the character twist within it and sort of reflecting views of the time within it. You've got a great sort of companion I would have liked to have seen travel with the 10th Doctor. You have a great sort of what-if companion in the form of Ivy Clark, which is brilliant, and you would like to see sort of the 10th Doctor travel with her. So hopefully if they do like a specials box that Ivy Clark comes back, to the monster within it using sort of the smog, really great idea, sort of using that, you know, definitely does feel sort of almost riffing off sort of Atmos with the Sontaran two-parter in a way, but it really does play and utilise the setting to its advantage, and I think that's why The Creeping Death is probably my favourite of the 3 of Volume 3. At number 7 we have Daughter of the Gods. Yes, the early adventure. What if Doctor had a 5-year anniversary special? Now this is a very interesting way of doing a multi-Doctor story. Now if you're familiar with the Daleks master plan, then you're going to get a real kick out of this, but this is a great sort of what if the Doctor never went to Kemble and carried on travelling with Katarina, because this story is very much Katarina's story. It's very much dealing with her as a character and how she's progressed with the Doctor. You know, the first Doctor, some really lovely moments with her, especially in part 2, you know, where he's very fond and he wants to show her all the wonders of the universe. But the way the story is structured is brilliant, and I think David K. Barnes was a brilliant choice for this because obviously he wrote The Dalek Occupation of Winter, which was a, you know, fan favourite release from the early adventures, and it's a really good story in itself. You know, the format I think is a really good format for it. You know, part 2 is very much we're following the second Doctor, Jamie and Zoe, and then obviously sort of part 2 we follow the first Doctor, Stephen and Katarina, and part 3 we see the events all sort of intertwine, and that's when you start to get sort of the Doctors meeting each other, which is great. You know, we have some lovely moments with the Second Doctor and Katarina very much reminded me of Tomb of the Cybermen when he's comforting sort of Victoria about family. You know, and there's sort of great animosity between the two Doctors because, you know, the Second Doctor's adamant he's never been to this planet. You know, you shouldn't be here, you should be on Kemble right now. So we see sort of what if the Daleks did get the time constructor, how unstoppable they will be, because this is very sort of traditional 60s Dalek stories, but they have a great menace to them. You know, Nicholas Briggs is really sort of channeling Peter Hawkins. It is a really good epic story. You know, it's very tense, but has so many beautiful character moments, and it's just a very rich story. I have done a full review of it, so if you want to know my full thoughts on it, then do check that review out, because it is a really beautiful release. At number 6, we have The Further Adventures of Lucy Bleeding Miller. This was just an absolute joy. This was one of the releases I was so excited for 2019's Big Finish catalogue, and it did not disappoint. It was just incredible. If you've been a long-term Big Finish fan and you sort of got into Big Finish through the Lucy Miller stuff, you know, and it plays a big part, then you're going to absolutely love this, because it is a really great set of stories. It was just so refreshing to listen to, because it was the joyous, energetic 8th Doctor full of life, and it was just really refreshing to hear a different sort of early 8th Doctor with full of life and vigour, and having Lucy Miller there, it just felt very... I just felt like I was getting back into Big Finish. It felt like I was starting Big Finish for the first time and discovering how wonderful the 8th Doctor and Lucy is as a pairing. It is just a wonderful set of 4 stories. You know, the Dalek Trap, I would probably say, is the weakest of the box, and I feel like as the stories progress, they just get better and better and better. You know, the Revolution game feels very much like an 8th Doctor adventure you'll see in sort of Series 2, the sort of idea of this sort of roller skating sort of race thing going on, which is really cool and fun. You know, it does have that sort of feel to it, like a Series 2 8th Doctor adventure. Then we have the wonderful House on the Edge of Chaos, which is superb, a really great concept, that this house is, you know, surrounded by nothing, and there's this sort of base under siege sort of feel to it, this sort of static, and the house has to keep growing and growing and expanding to stop the static getting in, and it's a really great story. And then we have the finale, which is obviously the Island of the Fendal, which is my favourite of the set of stories. And this box set, the sort of, it feels like a mini series of adventures, you know, because Island of the Fendal really does link back to the Dalek's Trap, so it feels like a sort of series of adventures. And I don't really want to talk much about Island of the Fendal, because that's for you to discover, because it is a really great story how it sort of links back to the first story, because it is a very good series of adventure, and I definitely want to have more 8th Doctor and Lucy, because it was just an absolute joy. 5th place, we have Warzone and Conversion, rather fitting, a 5th Doctor release. Now this is the last story in the Mark sort of set of stories from 2019, and this was a superb way to close it off. Now this was a story what should have been told on TV. You know, the 5th Doctor's sort of pain and loss of Adric really comes into it, and sort of reconfronting the Cybermen. Obviously the 5th Doctor and this are faced with Cybermen in spare parts, but it didn't really deal with sort of the trauma and loss of Adric, whereas this set of stories really does that, because Warzone is a story what should not happen. It should not be able to be done on audio, but it does work incredibly well. It just does this idea of a sort of fun race with sort of a sinister twist to it, with it sort of dealing with how you deal with pain, and these people just wanting to keep thriving and become, you know, better and better and upgrade themselves so they can become fitter, faster, have better stamina, and just, you know, increase on their, you know, get better personal best times. And, you know, there's this society what are unaware of Cybermen, but they're slowly becoming Cybermen in the sense that they're upgrading slowly and slowly. And that's really great, especially when the 5th Doctor realises what's happening on this planet. You know, that he is so... It's very much the 5th Doctor, like the Caves Androzani, so defiant, and I feel like this is one of Peter Davison's, if not his best performance as the Doctor. It is superb, you know. Mark as a character, I feel like if you've listened to the whole sort of series of Mark adventures, there is great payoff, because in Tartarus you have sort of the 5th Doctor sort of being haunted by the Cybermen in there, especially in Tartarus in the part 2, when he's sort of dealing with sort of the horrors of that, which is really great. And sort of seeing that sort of come to the forefront within this release and facing the Cyber Leader again is brilliant. And Tegan confronting the 5th Doctor, you know, did you like Adric? And you have a great sort of moment between those two characters discussing Adric, which is really, really fun. And obviously the 80s Cybermen are great, you know, you get great visuals of sort of this sort of cyber sort of tomb world, which is amazing. You know, it is a really great set of stories, and I don't want to spoil much to it, because, you know, it really explores Mark as a character, and it is a fun release. I absolutely did enjoy listening to this one. And Peter Davison is absolutely on fire within this release. At number 4, we have Night of the Fendal, probably my favourite Torchwood release I have listened to. I absolutely adore it. And now obviously Torchwood is, made for adult listeners, mature listeners. So if you're a kid and you want to listen to this, you might want to wait a few years, because this is a brilliant story, but it is so grim, it's so dark. The characters are so unlikable, so when they get their comeuppance, you're like, yeah, you deserve that. It is a really gruesome story. The idea of them making a snuff film, which is basically, if somebody dies, somebody actually dies making the film. It's really grim. It's a great sort of sequel to Image of the Fendal, because it's set at the Priory as well. And I think what makes this story work is obviously you get to see the true horror of the Fendals and the Fendalines in that sense, because it's taking a Doctor Who monster and putting it into a Torchwood setting, so you really get to explore the darker nature of the creature, of the monster within that story. And this is a perfect example of that. Eve Miles gives a superb performance. The supporting cast are just, deeply unlikable. The music just feels very sort of, by Blair Mower is amazing. It really does riff off Dudley Simpson. It is really great. It's great tense, and it's an hour-long story, and it is one of the highlights, and it's probably my favourite Torchwood release I've listened to. It is just great. It is absolutely lovely. Quite dark, grim, and just downright unsettling, and just very eerie, and I really do love it. I've done a full review of it, so do check out that review for my full thoughts, because it is a really good story, and again, suitable for adult listeners. At number 3, we have the Third Doctor Adventures of Volume 5. Now this was a very exciting release, because we see the Brigadier come into the forefront, we see Liz Shaw return, we get Liz and Joe meeting, which is very good. And obviously they did meet in a novel called Wages of Sin, but to have an actual audio of those two characters meeting, really good. This, was a very exciting release, because obviously we had John Coleshaw voicing the Brig, who is so uncanny. Honestly, he does a superb job. It's just like Nicholas Courtney is there. It's definitely one of John Coleshaw's best sort of impersonations, because he gives a great performance as the Brig. But the stories themselves are phenomenal, especially Primal. John Dorney has just done the impossible. Now, Inferno is a greatly loved classic. It's very sacred in the form of sort of classic Doctor Who. I feel like John Dorney's very much done, a Spearhead from Space and Terror of the Autons. It's very much like, Terror of the Autons is to Spearhead from Space. It has that great sort of sequel vibe. It explains more, Liz's research after the project. And I think John Dorney especially is the king of cliffhangers. This release is superb. It has some of the best cliffhangers I've experienced in Doctor Who. I feel like this is definitely one of the best sort of releases for cliffhangers, especially Primord. It is amazing. Just the way the story is, it really sort of explains sort of the brutality of Primords. Sort of the green werewolf lion creatures are amazing. Within it, the things that happen to the Doctor within it, you really think, is the Doctor going to get out of this alive? It has so many great twists and turns within it. It is amazing. And then you have the Screams of Death, which is probably the weaker of the two. But it's a great story. It is a very cool traditional story. You have Benton within it, which is a great little addition, and sort of the Third Doctor and the Vardens. It really does sort of feel very 1970s-esque, that story. But Primord is definitely the highlight of this release. Primord is definitely the standout of the two stories. Part 1, I believe, is free on the Big Finish free section. And I think Daisy Ashford, Caroline John's daughter, does a very good job voicing Liz Shaw, her mom's character. And it's great to see sort of the Third Doctor catch up with Liz, which is really nice. And this is, especially sort of the ending sort of towards the last half of Primord, it's very much sort of last man standing with the Brig and Joe. At number 2, we have the Wallmaster Anti-Genesis. Now, the Wallmaster series is one of my favourite Big Finish ranges. I just know you're going to get good quality stories when you listen to it. All 4 box sets have been phenomenal, and this is definitely the highlight of the Wallmaster releases from 2019. I'm very excited for the next Wallmaster box set out, in October, which is going to be so cool. The idea and the premise of this story is brilliant. It is absolutely amazing. From the first story, From the Flames, is very much sort of a Master-like episode. It's sort of setting the series up in the sense that, the Time Lords and the Daleks have a pact, but they will not sort of interfere with each other's sort of history, but they will not alter their sort of creation and where they are in time, much like the Doctor did in Genesis. So they sort of made a deal going, look, we're not going to try and avert your creation, You know, we're going to let time run its course. But the Master, being sneaky, he takes the Genesis codes and goes back to the sort of creation of the Daleks. And it is really great, you know, sort of a Time Lord sends a sort of a Time Lord on a mission to, you know, retrieve the Master and get the Genesis codes back. And she has quite a grim fate involving some barbed wire. You know, this whole story of the Master being put in Genesis of the Daleks is great because you have the sort of iconic dialogue, but slightly altered, so you feel like you know what the characters are going to say, but it's been slightly altered, and it's great. You know, the Wallmaster confronting Davros, but Davros has a very different fate within this, which is quite odd, which is quite gruesome what the Wallmaster does to Davros within it. You know, and I feel like it's just the Wallmaster taking charge of the Daleks. And, you know, story 3, we see different Gallifreys, you know, different alternatives. And this is where we get sort of Mark Gatiss' Master involved with the time strategist trying to put things right and sort of stop the Master's sort of Dalek Empire and sort of the downfall of the Wallmaster and the Daleks in the 4th story, and the way this box set ties into the 1st volume, how it sort of leads into the events of Beneath the Viscoid is really great. And I don't really want to say too much on it because it is a really fun adventure of stories, and Derek Jacobi, he's just one of the best Masters, isn't he? He's just phenomenal within this, and it's just a great set of stories. I highly recommend Wallmaster Anti-Genesis. Right, so what is my number 1 release of Big Finish's catalogue from 2019? Is it Legacy of Time, the Grand Epic box set? No, it is the 4th Doctor Adventures Series 8. I might be cheating putting a whole series there, but you know, it is a series and they sort of events all sort of intertwine and interconnect. Now this is a series I just absolutely adore. I had a lot of fun listening to it. This is how Big Finish should do a series. Now this is sort of no sort of 4 box set series where you get filler, because this series is a perfect balance of, you know, carrying on the story arc and continuing, still having standalone stories and still sort of continuing in the arc in a format. Obviously this is Big Finish, in my personal opinion, getting their own take on the 4th Doctor, because prior to this it's very much been his TV companion. So by giving the 4th Doctor an original companion, it's very much Big Finish taking their own spin on the 4th Doctor in the form of Anne Kelso. And Anne Kelso is a really great character, and obviously she's going to play a big part next year in Dalek Universe. And John Dorney has said that you don't need to sort of listen to the 4th Doctor Series 8 or River Song Series 8 to understand Dalek Universe. He said it will just enrich your experience of the series itself. But the series itself, I think it's definitely, possibly my favourite 4th Doctor series. Is just superb. You know, the Sin Strain kill, I would say, is sort of the weakest of the series. But, you know, Planet of the Drashigs, very much Doctor Who does, you know, Jurassic Park with Drashigs. It's a lot of fun. Then we have the Enchantress of Numbers, the 3rd story, with the 4th Doctor and Ada Lovelace, which is a beautiful character story, but with the very sort of creepy sort of Plague Doctor monster within it, and that has quite a great sort of, how that relates to Ada Lovelace is really clever and really great. I'm not going to spoil it because it's a lot of fun, and quite a cool story, and you can easily visualise that being in the 1970s. And then we have the False Guardian, which is sort of part 1. Is sort of part 1 of sort of a story with what continues in Time's Assassin. It's really great how those 2 stories sort of interconnect. I had a lot of fun with that story. I don't really want to say too much on the second half, because that's where sort of the main spoilers lie in the whole sort of series. You know, but this sort of Fever Island, Tom Baker gets something very different to do. You know, he's playing this sort of James Bond villain-esque character, which is very fun. And then we have the Perfect Prisoner part 1 and 2 by John Dorney, and again he delivers some superb cliffhangers in the Perfect Prisoner, and we have a great sort of twist involving Anne, the delegates from the Daleks Master Plan are in it, you know, and sort of the aftermath of that. It just feels like a very grand epic series, and how it all sort of interconnects is brilliant. But it still has standalone stories, but it still connects to the arc in some way, so it feels like when you get to the last sort of story within the box set, but you have a great sense of payoff, and it does feel so good. And I absolutely love this series of 4th Doctor Adventures. It is really good. I really do highly recommend this, because I just absolutely adored listening to this. It is great fun. You can tell that Tom Baker's having a lot of fun recording it, and Jane Slavin as Anne Kelso is superb. You know, a really likeable companion. and I can't wait to see her continue with the 10th Doctor in Dalek universe. So that concludes my top 10 Big Finish releases from 2019. Yes, I know this list isn't going to be for everyone, but again, it's my opinion, so please respect that. So I'm going to do a few little honourable mentions. I'm going to say Rose Tyler Dimension Canon, really good set of stories, highly recommend that. Emissary of the Daleks, really good 6th Doctor and Perry Dalek story. And I'm going to say the 4th Doctor comic adaptations as well, a really highlight as well from the 2019 catalogue. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. So thank you very much, and bye bye.